After a long, hard day, a single mother was driving home in the chilly rain on a deserted road when she unexpectedly noticed a wet man limping and dragging himself down the roadside. She immediately went outside to see how he was doing and offered to assist. After bringing him home, she warmed him by the fireplace and prepared him tea. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow I have something special just for you. The rain fell in sheets over Brayfield, drumming against tin rooftops and puddling in the uneven streets. A cold wind twisted between the buildings, carrying the sharp tang of wet earth and smoke from the bakery ovens. Matilda Whitmore pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, the wool damp and heavy, and pressed her thin gloves against her chest. The night had a weight tonight, a heaviness she could feel in her bones, in the ache of her back from hours standing over the dough. She looked at the empty street, the way the streetlights wavered through the mist, and thought of her son, Liam, asleep upstairs in a room that smelled of mothballs and old wood. Her steps splashed softly through the puddles, each one a small, cold shock against her boots. She was thinking of the bills, the leak in the roof, the foreclosure notice she hadn't yet found the courage to open. Her ordinary life pressed down on her, steady and relentless, like the rain. And then she saw him. He was at the edge of the street, leaning against the wrought iron fence that bordered the empty lot across from her bakery. His coat was soaked through, dark and clinging to his frame. One shoulder sagged lower than the other, his arm bent at an odd angle, the sleeve torn and streaked with rain and mud. Matilda froze. For a moment, she thought he was just a man out too late, the storm catching him unprepared. But the way he moved, slow, careful, almost in pain, told another story. He looked up, and she noticed the lines of exhaustion etched into his face, the way his eyes carried something she could not name at first. Fear? Weariness? A quiet, hard-edged pain that belonged to someone who had seen too much. He was a soldier, she realized, from the way he carried himself even in weakness, the way he bore the weight of his own body with a discipline that was half instinct, half habit. Matilda hesitated. She knew the world would not approve. The neighbors would whisper. The sheriff might even notice. Brayfield had its rules, and a single woman taking a man in, especially a man like him, someone not like her, someone the town would look at and judge, was not the sort of thing people forgave. And yet, her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She raised her hand in a small, almost timid wave, and the soldier met her gaze. There was a brief understanding in the silent moment between them, a recognition that they were both carrying burdens too heavy to name aloud. He stumbled slightly, and she moved toward him without thinking. "Do you need help?" she asked, her voice barely above the rain. It sounded strange even to her ears, soft, hesitant, but real. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and the next step he took brought him closer to her. She could see now the dull ache in his eyes, the half-hidden scar along his jaw, the limp that made his stride uneven. Her heart thudded in her chest. This was no small act. A choice lay before her, quiet, dangerous, and against everything she knew about safety and propriety. And yet, she could not turn away. Matilda gestured toward her car, its hood slick with rain. "I have a warm place," she said. "You can, come with me, just for the night." He hesitated, glancing up at the storm, at the puddles, at the dark street that stretched endlessly behind him. Then, slowly, he nodded. The moment felt suspended, as if the rain itself had paused to witness it. She led him to her car, keys trembling in her hand. The engine roared to life, cutting through the storm. As the tires hissed over the wet asphalt, she caught a glimpse of his face again, a mix of relief and quiet caution, and something inside her shifted. It was only the beginning. Not just of one night, but of a chain of events that would break open her ordinary life and leave her facing choices she had never imagined. Before we continue, let us know where you're listening from. A small act can ripple farther than we ever see. And tonight, a simple ride through the rain would change everything. The car smelled of wet leather and the faint sweetness of the bread she had baked that morning. Marcus, the soldier, settled into the passenger seat with a cautious ease, as if each movement had been measured 1,000 times before. Matilda's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale beneath her gloves. Her mind raced, replaying the act she had just done. Was it foolish? Dangerous? She could almost hear the judgments forming in the minds of her neighbors, the whispered condemnations she had long feared. She glanced at him. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them carried weight, and she felt it pressing against her chest. Liam's small bedroom upstairs, the worn quilt he slept under, the unwashed laundry in the basket, all of it seemed suddenly fragile. Yet she could not undo what she had done. She had opened her door, and now the consequences would unfold. At home, the warmth hit them first, the dry air from the heater, the scent of old wood, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Liam stirred at the sound of the car door, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Matilda knelt to scoop him up, the child murmuring against her shoulder. She felt the weight of responsibility heavier now, layered with the responsibility she had just taken on by sheltering Marcus. We have to be careful, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Marcus nodded, his face half-shadowed, eyes dark pools of fatigue. She studied him, the faded insignia on his coat, the scar at his temple, the way his hands clenched against the damp air. Someone had sent him into the world with injuries both visible and invisible, and here he was, standing at the threshold of her small life. Dinner was quiet. Liam ate slowly, watching the rain streak the windows, listening to the muted drip from the gutters. Matilda prepared a simple meal, boiled potatoes, bread, a pot of stew thick with onions and carrots. She served Marcus without question, though every action felt like stepping further into a world she had always avoided. He thanked her softly, the words measured, careful. Politeness carried weight, and in the way he said it, she sensed a lifetime of training, discipline, and restraint. When the plates were cleared, she sat at the kitchen table and watched him rest in the living room, wrapped in a blanket she had thrown over the chair. She thought about what she had done. She thought about the whispers she might hear tomorrow. Brayfield was a town that valued appearances, that measured worth by conformity. She had crossed that invisible line. And yet she could not call back her choice. Not right now. Not ever, if she wanted to remain true to herself. Sleep came late. Liam fell first, curled into the corner of the bed, murmuring something about school and toys. Marcus stayed awake longer, sitting on the edge of the couch with a quiet vigilance that made the room feel taut. Matilda lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Her heart still thrummed with the echo of the night's decision. There was fear there, yes, but beneath it, a faint pulse of something stronger, resolve. Morning arrived gray and heavy, the sky still swollen with rain clouds. Matilda went to check on Marcus, to see if he was awake, but the room was empty. On the kitchen counter, where she had left a glass of water, something gleamed in the pale light, a small, round medal, the Purple Heart. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. The medal was cold, heavy with meaning, and she felt the weight of gratitude, sacrifice, and history pressed into her palm. She hid it in the bottom drawer, careful to close it quietly. The world outside was still waiting, ready to judge, ready to press down with expectations she had no desire to meet. But the choice had been made. She had done the right thing, and even if no one else could see it, she had acted with courage. Later that morning, a letter slid through the mail slot. Matilda pulled it out, her fingers brushing against the damp envelope. Her breath caught. It was a foreclosure notice. 30 days. 30 days to save the house her father had built. Her chest tightened. This was the quiet consequence she had not anticipated. One small act of kindness, and the world had shifted in ways she could not yet measure. She held the letter, staring at the words, the numbers, the threat. And for a long moment, she thought of the storm outside, of the soldiers she had helped, of Liam sleeping safely upstairs. The choice was hers, still, but the cost had begun to show. The days after the storm passed slowly, each one dripping with gray light and soft drizzle. The Purple Heart lay tucked in the bottom drawer of Matilda's kitchen cabinet, hidden beneath old receipts and a bundle of letters from her father. She touched it sometimes, just for a second, feeling the cold metal and the weight of a story she could not yet read. Every time she did, a quiet hum of resolve stirred inside her, mingling with the worry that had begun to crowd the edges of her mind. The neighbors had noticed. Not directly, not with open accusation, but in the tilt of heads, the half-smiles that carried judgment, the way conversations paused when she walked by. Sheriff Dunning stopped in front of her bakery one afternoon, tipping his hat with a tight, polite smile that carried unspoken questions. "Evening, Miss Whitmore," he said. His voice was measured, controlled. "Say, did you happen to see anyone passing through last night? Someone out in the rain?" Matilda's fingers rested on the counter, feeling the familiar grooves in the wood. "No, Sheriff," she said quietly. "Just me and my boy. That's all." He studied her a moment longer, then tipped his hat and left. Nothing was said aloud, but the message was clear. Helping Marcus, even for a night, had set her apart. And Brayfield did not forgive easily. At the bakery, she noticed the change in the customers, too. Some offered stiff smiles, their eyes flicking away too quickly. Others muttered under their breath, words that floated into her ears, sharp and faint. "White sympathizer," they said. "Foolish, dangerous." The phrases scratched at her, insidious, creeping under her skin. Matilda did not rise to argument. She carried on, kneading dough, dusting sugar across pastries, all the while thinking of the letter that had come with the foreclosure notice. 30 days. That was how long she had to save her home, the house built by her father's hands. Every time she felt the weight of the letter in her apron pocket, she shivered. Liam noticed the tension. He asked questions sometimes, small ones, innocent probes into the quiet spaces she tried to keep protected. "Mom, why won't the neighbors talk to us?" he asked one morning, his voice low and uncertain. Matilda smiled at him, forced and soft, and kissed the top of his head. "They don't understand, Liam," she said. "But we'll be all right." Inside, though, the fear of losing everything pressed against her ribs. Bills stacked higher each day, the bank called more frequently. The foreclosure notice was only the beginning. And then there were the small, cruel messages. Someone spray-painted the words "white sympathizer" across the side of her garage. She had stumbled upon it early one morning, her boots crunching against the gravel. She stood there, staring at the paint, feeling something deep and raw open in her chest. Anger? Sadness? Loneliness? All of it mingled, leaving her hollow. Marcus had left no note, no explanation, only the Purple Heart as evidence that he had been there, that her act of kindness had mattered, however fleetingly. She thought about him constantly, the quiet strength in his movements, the weight of the world he carried, and the look in his eyes that had met hers in that first storm. The thought of him lifted her even as the world pressed her down. The bank was not the only threat. Greenville Redevelopment, a small but persistent company, began to send letters as well, claiming they had old legal rights to part of her property. The papers were dense with language that twisted like smoke, clauses and references to documents from the 1970s that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. Matilda read them once, then twice, letting the words settle over her. Her father had fought to protect this land, and now, decades later, it was under threat again. Even as the rain continued its steady fall, a subtle unease seeped into the town itself. Whispers followed her along the street, stares lingered just long enough to be noticed. Some neighbors crossed to the other side when she walked past. Small acts, but cumulative, each one a tiny reminder that courage carried a price. Yet within the isolation, small moments of clarity appeared. Liam would laugh in the kitchen, unaware of the larger currents pressing down on them. She would watch him, brushing flour from his hair, and the quiet hum of her own conscience whispered, "You are doing right. Even if no one else sees it." In the evenings, she found herself at the kitchen window, staring at the empty lot across the street, imagining Marcus walking again, imagining the weight he carried in his chest, and wondering how many others like him walked unnoticed. The Purple Heart pressed against her palm in those moments, a reminder that one act, small and unseen, could ripple outward in ways the world might never acknowledge. And then, one afternoon, a more immediate crisis emerged. A letter slipped through the slot in her door, thick and official-looking. The bank's name was stamped in black ink, bold and unyielding. 30 days. That was all she had to save the home, to preserve the life she and Liam had built, and to honor the choice she had made to help a man in need. Matilda pressed the envelope to her chest and exhaled slowly. The quiet consequences were no longer abstract. They were tangible. They were threatening. And they were only just beginning. The evening air was thick with the smell of smoke before Matilda saw the flames. A fire had begun at the back of her property, creeping along the dry underbrush behind her garden, licking at the wooden fence with hungry tongues of orange and black. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the ground slick but not wet enough to halt the blaze. The crackle of burning wood echoed sharply, sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet of the small town. Liam's shriek brought her out of the kitchen and onto the back porch. The child was crouched near the edge of the garden, pointing with small, frantic fingers. "Mom! The fire!" Matilda dropped everything, her heart hammering, and ran toward him. The heat bit at her skin, the smoke stung her eyes. She grabbed Liam, pulling him close, shielding him with her body as the flames grew taller, consuming the underbrush that her father had planted, her carefully tended garden of herbs and vegetables, the small patch that had always felt like a sanctuary. Panic clawed at her chest. She had no water, no equipment, and no one nearby who could help. The neighbors were inside their homes, shutters closed, faces pressed against windows. Brayfield had watched her suffer quietly over the past days, whispering, judging, but no one had offered more than a glance. And then, as if summoned by desperation, a familiar figure appeared. Marcus emerged from the smoke and shadows, not alone. Behind him came Jonas and Reed, two other veterans she had never met, moving with the quiet coordination of people who had faced danger together before. Their presence was sudden, electric, and she felt the tension in the air shift. Without hesitation, Marcus grabbed a hose from the side of the garage, looping it around a tree to reach the worst of the flames. Jonas followed, carrying a bucket of water from the street, and Reed moved to clear debris, creating a firebreak. They worked with precision and purpose, their movements confident, practiced. Matilda felt herself steady beside them, handing buckets, moving hoses, acting despite the panic that had threatened to overtake her. The fire roared, crackling and spitting embers into the night. Liam clung to her side, eyes wide, watching Marcus bend and spray water with calm authority. In that moment, the neighborhood could no longer look away. They saw her standing beside him, not helpless, but determined. They saw Marcus moving with courage, not as a stranger, but as a man whose presence was saving a home, a child, and a garden. Hours later, when the fire was subdued, only smoldering patches of scorched earth remaining, Matilda stood in the quiet aftermath, hands blackened by soot, hair damp with sweat and smoke. Liam nestled against her, exhausted but unharmed. Marcus approached, his eyes tired but calm, and handed her a small bundle of wet ash from the garden, a reminder of what had been threatened, what had almost been lost. "Your garden," he said softly. "It's going to be okay. We saved it." Matilda looked around. The house had survived. The fences were damaged but intact. The neighbors had begun to emerge, peering from behind doors and windows, murmurs traveling through the streets. Their judgment, once silent and cutting, had shifted. They had witnessed courage, witnessed care, and the quiet defiance of a woman standing firm in the face of danger. She thought of the purple heart tucked in her drawer, of the quiet choice she had made in the rain, of the long chain of small acts that had brought her here. Her chest tightened with something heavy, something fierce and fragile all at once. And somewhere deep in the smoke and aftermath, she realized, bravery did not belong only to soldiers. It belonged, too, to those who chose to act when no one else would, to offer shelter, to face judgment, to lift a child out of harm's way. For the first time in days, she felt a fragile thread of hope weave through her exhaustion. The town had seen her. Not the whispers, not the judgments, not the labels, they had seen her. And in that seeing, a small, significant shift had begun. The morning after the fire brought a calm that felt almost unnatural. The air was crisp, the smoke lingering faintly over the garden like a memory, and the sun struck through the clouds in pale, filtered shafts. Matilda stood at the edge of her porch, Liam at her side, both of them quiet, staring at the remnants of the night's chaos. The garden was scarred, the fences blackened, but the house had stood firm. For the first time, the threat of destruction seemed, somehow, contained. A knock at the door startled them. Matilda's heart lurched. She had grown accustomed to the world's quiet judgment, the whispers behind her back, the suspicion in every glance. But this knock was different, insistent, deliberate, carrying a weight she could not yet name. She opened the door to find Marcus standing there, his coat still damp, Jonas and Reed just behind him. And at his side was another figure she did not recognize, a woman in a crisp suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "I'm Valerie Knox," the woman said, her voice firm but calm. "I'm an attorney. Marcus told me what happened here, and I've reviewed the documents Greenville Redevelopment sent. There's corruption in the chain of custody, Sheriff Dunning has been complicit. Your property is legally protected. The foreclosure and redevelopment notices are void." Matilda's chest tightened, disbelief warring with relief. She had feared this day for weeks, the threat of losing the home her father had built, of seeing her small world erased. And now, in the span of a moment, the weight lifted. "You saved a life," Marcus said, his eyes meeting hers. "And that matters. The VA wants to recognize your actions formally. Your mortgage will be cleared. The home is yours." Tears pricked at Matilda's eyes. She swallowed them, thinking of Liam, thinking of the choices that had brought them here. One act, small and quiet, had rippled outward in ways she could scarcely measure. Valerie Knox laid out the legal documents on the kitchen table. Each sheet bore the marks of vindication, stamps, signatures, clauses declaring her land untouchable. Dunning's complicity was exposed, he was placed on administrative leave. Greenville Redevelopment had no claim. The house, the garden, the life she and Liam had built, all restored. Marcus reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, the three of them in the aftermath of the fire, Liam smiling despite the soot and ash, the garden scorched but alive. Written on the back, in Marcus's careful hand, "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Matilda held it close. The image captured more than survival, it captured recognition, dignity, and the quiet truth of her actions. Her small courage had been witnessed, recorded, affirmed. Even the town began to shift. Neighbors, once wary and distant, offered nods of respect. Small gestures, packages left on her porch, invitations to community events, the faint murmur of gratitude, started to thread through the days. The world had noticed, finally, that courage could live in quiet, unassuming forms, and that one woman's choice could ripple through the fabric of the community. Liam, now perched on the edge of the kitchen counter, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mom," he said, softly, "you were really brave. Like Marcus." She felt something warm in her chest, a release she had not known she needed. "We all are, in our own way," she said, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "Sometimes it just takes a storm to show it." Marcus and the veterans prepared to leave, their work done but the connection enduring. Before walking away, Marcus turned back. "The garden," he said, nodding to the small plot behind the house. "Keep it. It's yours now. And it's not just plants. It's hope. For you, for Liam, for anyone who needs it." Matilda watched them go, feeling the first lightness in weeks, a quiet strength blooming in her chest. The storm had passed, the fire had tested her, and the consequences of her kindness had resolved in ways that no letter, no notice, no whispered judgment could undo. The world had shifted, not because she demanded it, but because she had acted with quiet conviction, and someone had seen it. Years passed, and the house on the corner of Brayfield remained, standing firm as it always had. The garden behind it had transformed, no longer a small patch of herbs and vegetables, but a sanctuary. Signs hung quietly, "Free produce for veterans." No questions. Veterans came and went, some carrying burdens heavier than Matilda could imagine, all leaving lighter than they had arrived. Flowers bloomed where vegetables once grew, and in the soil, a sense of dignity took root, visible in every green sprout, every leaf reaching toward the sun. Matilda moved among them, watering, pruning, planting, but she never sought recognition. Her work was quiet, deliberate, a rhythm she had chosen for herself long before anyone saw its significance. Liam grew alongside her efforts, learning that courage could be small, persistent, and steadfast, that acts of kindness mattered even when the world did not notice immediately. Letters arrived occasionally, photographs tucked inside envelopes from veterans and neighbors alike. Notes of thanks, simple and heartfelt, told stories of lives touched by her choices. Each one she kept, stacking them gently in a drawer alongside the Purple Heart, the photograph, and a small pile of memories that reminded her of the night the rain had changed everything. One afternoon, as she bent over the garden, Liam tugged at her sleeve, eyes bright. "Mom," he said, tilting his head, "do they know you're the one who saw them?" Matilda paused, looking at him, feeling the weight of the question, its innocence, its truth. She smiled softly, planting a seed in the soil. "I don't know, Liam. But maybe, that doesn't matter. Sometimes, just seeing them is enough." And she thought of Marcus, of the veterans, of the neighbor who whispered a thank you she would never hear aloud, of the town slowly learning that courage and kindness could shift even the hardest hearts. She thought of the storm, the fire, the letters, and all the quiet moments in between. She thought of being seen, truly seen, and of how that small recognition could ripple outward to change a life, a community, a world. The garden glowed in the late afternoon sun, colors vivid, alive, a testament to choices made and witnessed. Matilda straightened, brushing dirt from her hands, and looked at the rows of vegetables, the flowers, the signs, and the small figures of veterans walking through, carrying their burdens a little lighter. A moment of quiet. A breath. And Liam's voice again, simple and profound, "Mom, they feel safe here because of you." Yes. Safe. Seen. Valued. And perhaps that was enough. Thank you for listening. May you carry the truth of being seen and the courage of quiet kindness into the world around you. Even small acts matter. Even small choices change lives. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.